So unfortunately, we do not have Randy tonight, so you're gonna have to bear with me as I stumble through.
That'd be great.
So I don't really think we need welcome and introductions, do we?
We sure don't. We can just call the order.
Call to order at 6:01. So we do attendance.
Yeah, and we are all in person, so I actually don't need to roll call anything or anything like that.
Perfect.
So I made note of who's here.
So I will do the land acknowledgement, which I've prepared in advance and got from Randy. I want to begin our time together with an acknowledgement honoring all Indigenous people, the people who came here before us and nurtured this place as stewards of Mother Earth, the first people. I make this acknowledgement aware this land is unceded and that issues of water and territorial rights and encroachment upon sacred sites are ongoing in the Wabanaki homeland. I acknowledge the Osakwag people who lived in what is now Scarborough, and that as we support efforts for land and water protection, we honor the current tribes who have stewarded this land throughout generations. Okay, we can vote on the minutes.
We do have an,
Oh,
all right, more people joining.
excellent.
But yeah, we still can vote on minutes, so.
So I had one change. I noticed that the minutes said March 24th, not April, but other than that, they looked good to me.
Thank
I
you.
don't know if anyone else
I'll
had
make that fix.
any changes.
All right. Then we can have a motion.
Move to approve the minutes. Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
Okay, we've got some old business and some new business.
Public comment first. Oh, you're reviewing the
I'm
agenda.
reviewing
Sorry.
the agenda.
You are, you sure are. You're following the agenda. I'm sorry.
But we can open it up for public comment now.
So we do have, Andrew Mackey is joining us, online. Andrew, if you have public comment, you can, all right then. Go ahead, Andrew.
Good evening, everyone. I will say I have another meeting at 7, so I have to leave about 6:30. But I do want to just mention that the Scarborough Land Trust has our annual native plant sale and spring festival June 1st from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Broadturn Farm. We're doing pre-orders for plants now on our website. So if anyone wants to get native plants for your yard, I know this commission has talked a lot about the use of native plants in landscaping. This is your opportunity to get a whole variety of different native plants. Plus, we'll have a bunch of vendors out there, arts and some crafts, some kids activities. Should be a fun time. Hopefully the weather cooperates, and hopefully we'll see everyone out there on June 1st. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Do we have any other?
That is the only member of the public joining.
Okay.
And we do have, so Lauren Johnson, you're a newly appointed back in February to the commission. We can do a round of introductions, or if you want to start off by introducing yourself to the group here.
Sure. So I'm an alternate rather. I'm also an alternative, but I live just actually bordering. I'm looking out right now at the nature preserve and the little marsh here, the Spurwink Marsh here in Scarborough. So on Colthart Farms Road. And we've been here 24 years. And during that time, we've seen a lot of changes here in the marsh. And that was really my motivation in wanting to be part of this, because, you know, there's a lot of stakeholders here, certainly private landowners, the feds with Rachel Carson, the land trust, the town. And then as the marsh goes on, it goes into Cape Elizabeth. So there, for years, I've kind of just on my own tried to get some kind of connections between the different stakeholders, because there have been a lot of changes here. And I'm hoping at some point, this commission will address that. I have kept up with reading the minutes. I know that I wasn't sure what my role was as an alternate, so I was at least reading the minutes. So I am kind of up to date with what you're doing, and I'm a retired registered Maine guide, taught at the University of New England, taught in public schools, mental health career. Most of my career has been in mental health, especially working with kids. So that's who I am in a nutshell, and I don't know any of you. This is my first time seeing you.
Well, we can do a quick round of introductions. I'm Jamie Fitch, the town sustainability manager. So you and I have emailed a bit.
Yes.
And if you haven't already, even as an alternate, you would still need to get sworn in. So you need to stop by the town clerk's office to be sworn in. Because until that happens, I guess you're not technically a member of this commission. You wouldn't have voting authority or anything like that.
Yeah.
So if you can make it a point to do that sometime before our next meeting, that would be great.
Well,
So
that's to
welcome.
just come to the town office and say, I need to be sworn in?
Yep, just go to the clerk's office, they'll swear you in. It's pretty informal,
Okay,
necessary. So thank you.
thank you, Jamie.
Yep.
Jessica Sargent, Vice Chair of the Conservation Commission. I'm just filling in tonight for Randy Hogan, who has a conflict and can't be here.
Right.
I'm Eric Sanderson. I'm a planner for the town.
And your name again was? I didn't catch your name. The young man.
Eric?
Eric?
Hi, Lauren. I'm Abel Plod, and I've been on the commission since late last year. And I live in Scarborough as well, right up kind of near the Oak Ridge neighborhood over by like the main med kind of complex.
Yep,
Nice to meet you.
nice meeting you.
Hi, Lauren, I'm Ben Flanders. I joined the commission about the same time you did. I'm also an alternate. I guess I voted tonight because we have low numbers. I also serve on the planning board. So kind of helping to be a liaison between the two boards. I think unofficially at the moment, but I'm on both, so that it helps. I live over by like Lowe's Natural, off of Portland
Yep.
Farms Road, near the Eastern Trail. So
Hi, Ben.
I don't know if I look there or that.
I know, right?
I look at the owl. Hey, Lauren, Pete Slavinsky. I've been on the commission since 2007. So I guess probably the longest serving commission member. I live over on Ironclad Road, which is off in the Pleasant Hill area.
Yep.
I also do a lot of work with Friends of Scarborough Marsh, which is now part of the land trust. And I wear on my day job, I'm a geologist for the Maine Geological Survey. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
Very happy to have you.
And Karen, do you want to just do a quick hello?
Sure. Hi. So I'm Karen Shoup. I am the town council liaison. And since we're sharing where we all live, I actually live on the other side of the marsh here. I live on Pine Point Road near Ken's Restaurant in the Scarborough River Park that we have here. So welcome. And thank you for serving.
Thank you.
All right. Andrew has a hand up. Is that a new hand, Andrew, or an old hand? I'll allow you to talk if it's a new hand.
No, old hand.
Okay, thank you. All right. Moving along.
Moving along to old business, so conserving land and building resiliency. Maggie did send a brief update on the open space plan, but I'm volunteering you.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. And Karen was at the first ad hoc committee meeting also, so I welcome you to jump in. So the open space ad hoc committee met with the consultant at the beginning of May. And kind of that meeting, they kind of laid out our current conditions in terms of open space, conserved lands and things like that. We did have a pretty strong discussion about what would be conserved and counted towards 30 by 30. I think we still need to kind of work that out a little bit. But in terms of open space, we're honestly in pretty good shape with open space overall. About 25% of the town is counted towards open space, and we need to kind of parse out what portion of that would be considered 30 by 30 so that we kind of know where that baseline is. Public engagement is going to start this summer for that process. There will be a public meeting. I call it a public meeting. It's going to be an interactive open house in July, I believe the 25th, if my memory is serving me correctly. And then we'll also be doing kind of more informal events as part of like concerts in the park and Summerfest and things like that to try to get lots of input from the Scarborough community. And there will also be an online survey that people can take if they that will mirror the activities that are done at the open house and the information collected at the community events. So that there will be multiple ways that people can participate in that process. So they, I was personally really impressed with the consultant that came, or that we selected, and for the first meeting, what they had prepared, a lot of really great baseline data, some really useful maps. They've just been working on pulling data from the town and then state beginning with habitat, state conserved land database and things like that. And compiling that all together. And I can share those materials with this group if you are interested. So I think we meet again late June to prepare for the open house and the community events over the summer. That will be kind of that focus of that meeting. And then we'll meet again in August as an ad hoc committee kind of to talk a bit about the information that was gathered through those events. And the goal is to have a draft ready for the council to review likely in January or February. So it'll be a pretty streamlined process once we get underway. Karen, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I think that was a great rundown. I just, it really was a great group of people. I think we really had a great conversation. I'm looking forward to the next meeting and the open house. And if anyone's super motivated about open space, I'm sure we'll be looking for volunteers because we are going to be trying to do little tables at events throughout the summer, because summer is generally a tough time to get people to come to open houses and get engaged. So we kind of want to make a little bit more of an effort to get out there at different things.
Are there any next steps or open requests for the Conservation Commission?
Excuse me, not at this point. I think that probably after the open house and kind of compiling that information, there will be kind of some opportunity for the commission to weigh in. I will say it was great having representation from a wide cross-section of the town's committees, because they definitely provided a lot of really good information and input. For example, Scarborough Fish and Game, like their land is conserved, and that wasn't accounted for. There's 250 acres that they have conserved that hasn't been accounted for in some of the other kind of metrics that we've been looking at. So having them there and providing that input was fantastic. And a lot of examples of that where just kind of the local residential knowledge and expertise has, even in that first meeting, was really beneficial. So I think that is great. Maggie definitely brought forward this group's kind of conversation around open space and 30 by 30. And as she mentioned in her email, there isn't a set definition yet. It'll kind of evolve as we, I think, get community input and feedback and come to a consensus among the group with, what everybody will support. Because there's kind of the very black and white, this is what counts, this is what doesn't count. And then there's kind of a more philosophical discussion. And so trying to balance those, because I think the community will respond most to the philosophical, like the, what do we value? But in terms of counting 30 by 30 and encouraging or going into our ordinances, it needs to be very black and white, very concrete. And so we're looking to strike the balance between those two things.
Well, it will be mapped, like.
Yes.
It's gonna be. Boundaries will be made.
Right. Yes, for sure. So that's that process, hoping that I have the date of the open house on the agenda. Look at me. I knew I wasn't gonna remember it here. So yeah, it's scheduled for July 25th. It'll be kind of an informal drop-in, participate. And hopefully, you know, everyone from this group will be able to attend. And if not that, definitely provide feedback through the online survey or some of the other events that are planned. So that's what I have.
Excellent. Any questions? Thoughts?
But it went well so far.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really great to have all of the information kind of compiled, and it's really nice to have someone doing that for us, because I think, you know, staff could do that, but it's one of many things that we have to do. So it's nice having an outside person kind of compiling that and providing some objectivity and all of that. So really good. Environmental standards is next on the agenda. So there is the developer forum scheduled for tomorrow, with SEDCO is hosting it. It sounds like there are 12 to 18 people who have RSVP'd to attend. So we'll be presenting an overview of the environmental standards and getting some feedback. We did get one written comment so far. I think we'll probably have others coming in. Basically saying, you know, this is really going to impact development in Scarborough. And I think that that's kind of the point. So.
Correct.
So we'll have an update following at our next meeting on how that went. Definitely be collecting comments both during the event and encouraging people to submit written comments that can be reviewed. And planning staff will look into incorporating or not taking the feedback and deciding what to do with it.
Is there a deadline for feedback?
Not really. This is just one piece of the kind of public process. So I think that the hope was that it would go back to the ordinance committee in July or August. So, and then move forward from there. And I'm not sure, and I anticipate a lot of public participation through the ordinance committee process and through town council. They'll also have to go for a public hearing with the planning board. So there will be a lot of opportunity for people to weigh in. And I think that because this is a pretty significant proposal, that I think that there will be a lot of participation and a lot of pushback. Let's see how that process goes.
Is there an update on, so last meeting, we made a recommendation related to the floodplain mess, yeah.
Yeah, so I forgot that you guys didn't have that update yet. I forgot that was just last meeting. The town council approved a 2-foot freeboard, not the 3-foot that was recommended by this commission. And Pete was there on Zoom and spoke to the recommendation. I will say that prior to, like, at the first reading, it was looking like it was going to go to a 1-foot. They were just going to maintain a 1-foot freeboard. And after your presentation, they did vote to increase it to 2 feet. So I know that you were disappointed that they didn't go to 3 feet, since this group's been recommending that for over a decade. But it's still better than what it would have been if this group had.
It was very close. For a while, they were like, oh, okay, we'll do 3 feet.
We'll do 3 feet.
And then suddenly they backtracked and voted on 2.
Yeah.
So it's the process.
Thanks for going, Pete.
Thank you. So that loop is completed,
That one is, yeah,
probably for another, what, 40 years?
probably.
It's been,
It's 1984, right?
well, the flood maps are 40 years old, and then I forget when the ordinance was, 2003, 2009, something like that.
Yeah, I think I remember a 2003 date. I don't know if that's when they set Freeboard or,
So, I mean, there are opportunities to revisit that, but
Anytime the council wants to pass an ordinance, they could theoretically change it, right?
theoretically.
But that's.
but typically they only open up the floodplain management ordinance, when new maps are released.
Right, so there, but don't get me started.
All right.
Oh, Karen has a hand up.
Yeah, since you brought it up, I also want to note that that is the first town council meeting that I have ever missed. So I was not there to encourage my counselors to adopt the 3-foot. I think what I've identified, and maybe we can talk about it at some point, is a flaw in the system here where if I had known and planning board had known that 3 feet was on the table, we would have had planning board evaluate 3 feet. We went to planning board with 2 feet, not knowing that you guys were recommending 3. And I think if I had been at town council meeting, I would have been like, well, hold on. Planning board wasn't asked about 3 feet. I bet they would have supported it. And so I think just for future, like whenever we're thinking about ordinances or the process, we should be coming to you first, and really getting the real feedback we want. Because I realized I think that was one of the flaws in the system with the town council was, well, planning board says 2, so that's what we'll go with. And I was like watching the meeting after, just like yelling at the screen. So I just wanted to comment that.
Through it, so yeah.
Well, and Pete, I just want to thank you so much for showing up. Like I'm frustrated that they did not take your advice.
But that's okay, I just wanna, I think one thing that we need to focus on is a little bit more education to council on the
Yep.
issue. I felt like they didn't understand that the trigger is a new construction, redevelopment, or damage greater than 50%. They would have already had to go up 1 foot anyway. The additional 2 feet above that costs 1 to 1.5% of your construction costs. So it's not a significant number. So that I think is something that got missed, that the triggers are already in place. And if you're damaged, already have to change what you have to meet our current floodplain requirements, which were 1 foot above the edge. So it's not like you rebuild as you were, no matter what. It would have already been triggered to meet current floodplain standards, which was already 1 foot.
Right.
So you were on the ground and you got damaged more than 50%, for example, you're already gonna have to rebuild that section to 1 foot above. So it sounded like the council was understanding that it's a new trigger that would be. It's not, the triggers are the same, they have not changed.
Mhm.
So, and I don't know if that was just my interpretation or not, but.
I definitely got the impression they didn't read the commission's memo. That laid things out pretty clearly.
I will never miss a meeting again.
I'll just add though to Karen's point. It came up with planning board first. That's why I first heard about it. And there was like, well, one town did 3 feet, but everyone else was doing 2. That was what was brought to us by Brian Longstaff and gave a nice long, thing about it. And then I heard about it again at the commission meeting like a week later. So the way that the schedules worked out, the planning board happened before the commission even met to talk about it. So, and I think town council just in general looks at a planning recommendation more strongly than a conservation commission.
And at the same time, I feel like,
Planning board would have loved to hear conservation commission's recommendation first, and then they would take that into, they would
and
have.
I guess somehow we just
Didn't hear
missed it, we missed the window because we did half a year of work back in 2012. Came up with a white paper, full recommendations, draft language, everything on why and how to go to 3 feet. So I think the window was just missed because planning board should have seen that well before you guys took up 2.
Yeah.
It's not your fault, it's not your fault.
No,
I'm
yeah,
saying.
it's- all we got was like, this is the ordinance, this is what's happening. Do you want to do 2 feet or 1 feet?
Yeah.
That's basically the question that was asked to us.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard anything about it, being new to this and everything. I just wish that we had maybe done it one planning board meeting later and I would have at least known. to
Well,
talk.
and
We discussed.
I think
detail.
bringing it to conservation commission was an afterthought also, because there was, oh, we're gonna have planning board weigh in. We should probably have conservation commission weigh in also.
Right.
So, it was the
But planning
timing thing, and then yeah, and the process has been very long to get the maps and then very fast to adopt them. So it's, yeah, it was a lot of kind of issues that went into this. And like I said, at least they didn't stick with 1 foot because it was looking after first reading like they were going to stick with 1 foot. So.
Just in general, does there exist like a high level process map of just like how how things go between the boards?
How
Like,
the ordinance adoption process
Yeah.
works?
Is it like a spaghetti diagram or or is it like, I don't know, because like, you know, it seems like the cadence, right, very much does matter. And yeah, just as an opportunity to improve in the future, like,
I
you know,
think part of the problem is that various boards have meetings, say. Planning board used to be last year it was once every 3 weeks. This year it's the fourth Monday or the third Monday of the month.
Yeah.
Was where the fourth Wednesday, so sometimes like this month. We were 2 days before this meeting, but
Right.
often we're gonna be
Hmm.
after.
Right.
And so it really depends on when the meetings meet up.
Yeah.
And where the month and the days of the week begin and when there's a holiday, it's kind of a mess.
and
And
it's
so without having an orderly calendar where, you know.
Yeah.
First, we have conservation commission meet about something and then planning board, or however you want to, you know, stretch that out, and then town council, it just, the meetings are not regular.
Hmm.
Enough to
Right.
make that happen, and I wish there was a way to plan it out better,
So
projects.
I can give you an overview of, in general, how ordinance change or adoption process works, and there are exceptions, and it
Sure.
probably took me 4 years of being here before I really figured out like what the process is, because it does seem to be more consistent now than it had been when I first started working here. So, for example, ordinance changes that might come out of this committee. This committee works on it, maybe do some public outreach, get feedback, things like that. Once this the commission feels like it's ready to move on, it will go to the ordinance committee. And so the ordinance committee is made up of 3 town councilors. And so when it makes it onto the ordinance committee, agenda is up to the chair of that committee. So it'll go to the ordinance committee for at least 1 meeting, and sometimes multiple. That was part of the thing when I first started, was sometimes things sailed through in 1 meeting, other times it took multiple meetings. So I usually plan on 2 meetings. Lately, they have been moving through, with 1 meeting. Then it will go to the town council for the first reading. Depending on if it's a land use ordinance, it'll go to be referred to the planning board for a public hearing. And then come back to the town council for a second reading and a vote. Sometimes the second reading and vote happens at the same meeting. Other times they'll do a second reading and delay the vote, or the second reading and public hearing, I should say, excuse me. Sometimes they'll do the public hearing and the vote at the same meeting. Other times, they'll do the public hearing at 1 meeting and do the second reading and vote at the following meeting. It's a long process, because depending on when the planning board meeting falls within the town council schedule, it may be a couple months before it gets back to the town council.
Okay, all right.
So
Thank you.
in general, that is how that works. And there, like I said, there are some exceptions. If it's not a land use ordinance, it doesn't have to go to planning board and things like that.
Okay.
And then with the example of the environmental standards, we brought it to the ordinance committee so that they could at least be introduced to it, knowing that we had some more outreach that needed to happen before it would be ready for the ordinance committee to decide to move it on or not, which is why it was introduced to them in March or April. We're having a developer forum tomorrow, and other opportunities for feedback. And then it'll, like I said, go back to the ordinance committee, hopefully this summer, for their kind of review, feedback, and a vote to hopefully move it forward to council.
Thank you.
Pete's been on Conservation Commission for a long time, but it feels like we are learning the process more and getting involved in more ordinances. And so it has been a learning curve to learn the process. And I mean, if you try to like map it out, it's like, okay, so that's the second Wednesday. And you know, it's like the parts are, yeah, it's wild.
Yes.
To try to like
Yeah.
diagram out that timing is.
Yeah. Well,
There
and
are many other boards and things that have inputted insight into
Yes.
certain.
Yeah.
Issues,
Yeah.
so it's really gets pretty complicated.
yeah,
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then-
I would probably take the time element out of it just to try to even understand, like, based on the type of change, like,
Right.
where should it go?
Right.
But then, right, and then all the other layers of variables
Yeah.
where, well, they're not on this nuance or that, or all the other things.
Well, and then we've discovered in one of the other committees that I'm working with that the time of year that it goes to the ordinance committee is really important because we brought something to them in October and they decided not to do anything because the makeup of the committee was going to change in November because of the election. And so then we had to start back over at square one. So don't bring anything to ordinance committee in October is the lesson learned from that
Okay.
process. So, yeah, it's, like I said, there's lots of variables at play here, but in general, that's how the process works, and, if the stars align and the timing works out and things move smoothly, that's fantastic, usually it doesn't necessarily work out that way.
But
Well,
I'd say
thank-
there's also the interesting variable of sometimes there's an external deadline, like
Oh, it's the maps.
the maps
Yeah.
or an EPA consent decree, which like puts a hard stop on it. So that can really
Hmm.
change the
Right.
timing because you have to work towards that goal versus a more voluntary
Right,
process, which would have a different trajectory.
that's a good point too, yeah,
A lot of variables.
a lot,
A lot of
yeah.
variables.
Like I
So
said.
I think when there is an external deadline, we might need to be more intentional about the timing, so we don't have this hiccup again. Not that it's not hiccup, not to diminish it, but I think it was things got flipped
Hmm.
because of it taken so long, and then there was a hard deadline, and it just
Yep.
wouldn't have been our first choice in order of operations,
Thank you.
and could have had a different outcome. So, fun times. Are there? And I think that sort of goes into the next agenda item. I think we're still figuring that out with planning board. Like that's a work in progress, that how we coordinate and the order of operations so that everybody has the information that they need at the right time. And I think we're still feeling that out.
Yeah.
Yes, and what's the best approach to kind of get the information to the planning board?
Yes.
So, and again, we talked about how the timing doesn't always work out great for, this group to get the information. So planning board submittals were due on Monday this week. So, that's why you guys didn't get anything until yesterday. Fortunately, what came in, there wasn't a whole lot that, this group would necessarily need to comment on. They were pretty minor, submissions, although, the Downs did provide response to, the comments that this group had discussed at the last meeting, which I did distribute, to you all yesterday, and, we can go through them. So at this point, the commission won't have any additional formal comments to provide to the planning board. But we'll definitely listen to the feedback, and staff may incorporate some of them into staff comments because they still have their memos and things like that to write. So
When does that occur?
that will be prior to the June meeting. So when are staff memos done, Eric?
Yep, so staff memos would be done, probably the week of June. I think it'd be Friday the 7th, but they would be published on board docs and go out to the board on Monday the 10th, so a week before the meeting. So they'd be available June 10th, essentially.
Right, and then how would we have additional comments or questions? How does that?
I believe you can review those obviously on the board docs, it's public to anybody.
Well,
And
right,
then-
I'm talking about it as a
No.
commission,
Yeah, as a commission or as you individually, commission?
no, as a commission.
So
Is that what they
Somehow meet ahead of time.
they definitely didn't address some of the questions.
Yeah,
So, and I was having a conversation, well, actually Eric, Autumn, Angela and I were all having a conversation about that, and basically, Angela and Autumn and Eric, who are the ones that take the lead on the staff memos, they're aware that they didn't answer or address some of the questions, and they'll work that into the staff memo, but we can talk specifically tonight about items, that they may be able to, incorporate.
But yeah, that's kind of what I'm shooting
Yeah.
at, sorry, I think I.
No, it's okay.
Misspoke.
I want to welcome Marla.
Yeah,
If we get
welcome
those-
Marla.
I could just directly ask, but I could play it.
you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's part of.
Marla, we're discussing the response to our questions and comments related to the
The Downs
Downs.
submission.
submission. Yeah.
So let me find my mouse.
I had a
again.
feeling that's what you were talking about.
But I can't speak to the commission exactly unless I can talk to them. Right, I guess what she says.
So I will say the comments that were provided to them are reflected in the minutes that were just approved this evening, so you have that.
So I could use that and say, yeah, I could use
At
that.
least as with the initial,
Yeah.
for the initial comments
Right. I think in the minutes that we approved,
that you approved this
Yeah.
evening.
or if we pass a motion, just to bring comments during the meeting.
All right, so, this is the document that, the Downs provided in response to, the comments, compiled from the last, commission meeting. Pete, do you want to address some of your first of all, has everyone had a chance to kind of review the materials that they submitted?
I've only had a chance to skim through it.
That's,
Been a busy week.
yeah,
Just-
I know, you got it yesterday, so.
Yeah.
All right, so, as a reminder, they're talking about upgrading Downs Road. It is currently a private road. They need to upgrade it to bring it in compliance with town standards. They are proposing just 2 openings under the road, as critter crossings, they're calling them. And then there's a third opening for a third culvert for stormwater conveyance. And so they've included most of the commission's comments in this document. So what's bolded there was essentially the comment that was provided to them, and underneath is their response. They did not include anything about the conservation easement being held by a third party. That was left out of their response entirely.
That's been what I've kind of observed when we've ever brought it up. They don't directly say no, but they just do their best to avoid talking about that kind of stuff. Especially the Downs area.
Mhm.
I think they don't want to bottle themselves into agreeing to anything like that until they're finished.
Yeah.
Or maybe never, I don't know. They've been avoiding that question.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, we are not experts in this, but I think legally it's not a valid mechanism to hold it yourself.
yeah, Andrew raised that, and the comments that were provided them did say there's some question as to the legality of the landowner holding the conservation easement. So,
But I'm guessing that's not where you want to start.
No, it wasn't. I just didn't know how we wanted to go through it. I had some other questions / comments that I thought were not really addressed well.
all right, let's hear them.
I mean, the first was that the whole focus is, we're talking about, the whole focus is critter crossings and upgraded road, they're not even installing critter crossings. So, I mean, to me, that's one of the biggest things. Second question that I had was, they're actually increasing the footprint of the road, it looks like on the plans.
Yeah.
And they said we want to minimize all the impacts of wetlands, yet they won't address critter crossings, which are minimal impact compared to widening, raising the road, and then building out a grade. There was another comment I had. I also couldn't find the cross sections they said they're providing to us.
I didn't send you the plans.
Okay.
They were available at the link that was in the email. So,
I couldn't find them.
so it's in the full plan set. Did you look through the plan set?
I think it's downtown center first amendment. Right?
Yeah,
It's gonna be a big document.
it's a huge document.
Trying to get that, but maybe that's
So-
finding.
I have an overarching question. I read their responses. We met the minimum standards required.
Right, yes.
well, that's great, but we are the Conservation Commission, we are the town. You know, we acknowledge we're asking for more. I guess I was wondering what our standing is related to that.
So we can ask for what we want. If it's not in ordinance, they're not required to do it.
Right.
This situation is a little bit different because they will be looking for the town to assume ownership.
Right.
And accept the road.
Right, okay.
A
So,
lot of it can be tied into the road sign.
exactly. So,
Because it is currently and has always been a private road, but it will transition into a public road. And so there might be more of a hook related to that change.
yeah, and one of their arguments in here is that the traffic.
Oh, I read that. Now, the traffic's gonna be the same as it used to be. I was like, what?
As it used to be probably 40 or 50 years ago when it was a seasonal harness racing track. That's what they're talking about. So there's been a lot of change in that intervening time. A lot of habitat change, a lot of development around it,
Well, the population of Scarborough.
Scarborough, exactly.
Yeah, that one did not pass the test.
Yeah,
Yeah, the straight face test for me.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they were referring to 40 or 50 years ago.
yeah, they're not talking, they're talking about when, like, at the height of the racetrack, when it was a popular destination. Not, you know, and even that use has changed in the past decade when Scarborough Downs closed entirely. It used to be open for, you know, off-track betting and things
Right.
like that. Yeah, it's been lots of different kind of uses and changes in popularity and all of that. So, yeah, and doesn't change the fact that this is currently a private road. It needs to be brought to town standards and so Angela has shared that one of her concerns. So basically, the two options for the road are to ensure that it'll be a usable road, or to either under drain it to deal with the runoff from the road, or to raise it up. It's a wet system, it's going through a wetland. So if the road is under drained, that's going to have an impact on the wetland, because it's not just going to drain the road, it's going to drain the fringe wetland as well. And if you raise it up, you'll have some wetland impact, because you'll have to have slopes and do some wetland fill to stabilize those slopes and things like that.
Well, you'll have runoff from cars. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it was seasonal.
oil
You didn't harness race in the middle of winter.
Right,
There's gonna be salt, well, not necessarily, there's gonna be plowing
right.
at minimum.
There will be salt on the road also,
The salt, sand, plowing
right?
that's never occurred before. Or very
This was
minimal.
an opportunity to, there's the huge changes going on this road. Let's integrate all the right changes, to make it sustainable and resilient build for the future, not only the road, but also the areas of wetlands that are there. And I didn't see that in this.
Minimal.
Yeah, they're doing them.
Just-
Yeah.
That's what they try and get by through the planning board, saying we met the requirements technically. You know, the board's supposed to basically say that you meet the requirements. Right, unless they have, you know. And they have some authority to waive certain things. To make things better, like to reduce parking or impervious area or whatever. You know, you could do that on certain issues, but. Unfortunately, just because you don't like a project of the planning board, you can't just vote it down. Right. So I don't really, you know, the minimum standard is what they legally have to meet. And
Well,
I,
there's state and federal minimum standards, but I think that there is the issue of this.
The town accepting the road.
The town accepting the road
That's true.
standards.
Yeah.
That's a
Right.
completely different set, a different conversation.
Mhm.
Which I think is a valid conversation that I think we need to hold them to.
Yeah.
Because that's fine that they met the Army Corps of Engineers standards and the state standards, but. The town has to hold this into the, you know, in perpetuity.
Yeah.
And we have some standards.
No, absolutely, they have to meet the town standards too, that's absolutely what the planning board is supposed to be authorizing. But But if the town standards aren't stringent enough.
Right.
Then they need to be modified before this thing gets approved. Or we need to have some way, some mechanism to enforce that.
Marla, you had your hand up.
You're
You're
on,
muted, though.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so, I was gonna talk about this later, but one of the things that the state has is that hometown rule, where, we can have, ordinances that are stronger than even the state and federal laws. And it just seems that, if this was gonna be a brand new road, it would have to be a brand new public road. It would have to be up to town standards. So why, if it's going from a private road, especially in this district, why would they be allowed to not go up to those town standards? I guess it's confusing to me. Is there anything in our ordinances that means that if a road goes from a private to public, they don't have to meet town standards?
So they are required to meet town standards. The standards, I don't believe, speak to the number of openings and things like that, under the road. So it needs to be a certain width. It needs to be, constructed in a certain way so that, it drains properly. We're not going to have standing water and ice issues. We're not going to, it won't pose a safety hazard or anything like that. There are kind of those town standards that, relate to street acceptance. But I don't think our standards don't necessarily speak to wetland crossings and how many openings there need to be under the road and things like that. But that doesn't mean that we can't have them do that. It's just the planning board needs to make that a condition of approval.
So is the next step for this commission to communicate directly with planning board?
I think the next step is for these kind of comments and concerns to be conveyed to the planning staff. And they will incorporate that into staff memos. And we've, like I said, Autumn, Angela, Eric, and I already had a conversation about some of the concerns that we had from.
And I don't want to have this take up all night. Sorry, finish your thought.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I was more or less done.
One of the concerns I have, and maybe this is an unfounded concern, is in their last response. Where they say this area of the overall site is not part of this subdivision application, is therefore not part of this review process. What does that mean?
So. So the full wetland was not part of their town center subdivision. So we're asking for them to put the full wetland system into conservation. They're like, we don't have to do that. That's not being taken up as part of this amendment.
the way that they drew it is the road and nothing but, only the road, everything on, that's how they drew their subdivision,
And they drew it in a way to get around having to do anything else.
basically.
So they could come in and post all those wetlands at some point. No problem.
Well, this is
different.
This is an amended subdivision plan, so they have to get this approved still.
Right.
So they can amend it by removing the road from the subdivision plan and do it separately. I mean, theoretically.
I don't think that they want to do
They
that though,
don't,
because
they certainly don't.
that's how you get to that part of the subdivision. So they need to have, I don't know that the planning board would allow that because there wouldn't be access at that point.
It's just, it just gets to me that that can be done, yet the impacts will be felt by that surrounding area, and just because you draw a line on the map. Is saying that, oh, we're not gonna have an impact in this area,
Or-
or just deal with it later.
Just look at this.
And yeah, and that's not the way these systems need to be looked at, so that's probably our ordinances that are a problem, it's not.
Well, the subdivision was approved. Oh, the planning board approved the subdivision. I don't know how long ago.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
June 2023, so about a year. I guess kind of Pete, to your point, the good news is that the state subdivision law, which is incorporated into Scarborough's ordinance, and I think we have a couple of standards added on. They have some subjective items. I think it's about 17 or 18 of them. A lot of them having to do with health, welfare, safety, traffic. But one of them has to do with natural resources. So if the board finds that there's an impact to Scarborough's resources, they can let the applicant know that and say, what are you gonna do to kind of ease our concerns on that and make sure that there's minimal impact to that end. So I think between the road standards that we're gonna go through with Angela and Jamie and Autumn and some of the subjective things that the subdivision ordinance has, we can probably have those conversations.
Okay, back to.
Planning board would love more teeth. We really, I mean, to turn things down. That's all we. As a quasi judicial body, if they turn things down without teeth, well, they can be sued.
Yeah,
So
I'm
that's-
not saying we need to be turning things down,
Oh,
but
no.
things need to change.
Mod-
a bit.
yeah.
I mean, like, grass and loam, like, on the edges of the road, no, put something there that actually will suck up some weeds that are gonna go into the marsh. I mean, there are a lot of little recommendations that could be adopted that is not gonna increase cost.
Well, and I will say, because this is going to be a town road and the town will be responsible for maintaining it, they may want to see grass and loam on the side because it's easier to mow that than to have to maintain, other kinds of vegetation and stuff like that. So we just need to think about, long-term maintenance also, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
But anything in an ordinance or related plan can be a little bit vague, give the planning board the teeth to say, this should be done to minimize what impacts, blah, blah, blah. That can be interpreted however they want, and then they can take commission recommendation, say, to minimize the impacts, we need all these critical assets. As long as we have some kind of language to refer to, you can do it. So I see it.
Is there, I'm sorry, Marla, is your hand up again or from before?
You're muted also.
She shook her head, I think. maybe she
Okay,
did.
I'm coming back to this idea that, okay, so back to the letter and the response. It's my understanding if this was a new road, the Army Corps would require crossings every 50 feet,
Yes,
approximately 24 culverts. So what we're asking is not even close to that, right? It's
we're
much
asking.
less. It just seems like this really is not adequate.
So are there any next steps for us to take?
Or any additional comments
additional
that we'll bring
comments.
to staff.
I think we have to look at the plan. I didn't get a chance to, I didn't know what it was, so
I could have shared it.
okay.
And
Because,
that's a June 7th
because
deadline.
apparently the crossings are only dictated by elevation, at least according to the memo, so I'm really interested as to whether or not there are other elevations throughout the marsh, wetland, that meet those elevations, where you could put other crossings, so, but I would need to look at it before.
When would town staff need our detailed comments in order to incorporate into a June 7th?
Probably by the end of next week. So that's when.
Oh,
This is the only parcel, right?
So end of next week,
Yeah, if we can say by
Comments on-
June 1st.
June 1st.
And then the following week of the 3rd through the 7th is when we meet with the applicants to go over the comments. And then kind of figure out a path whether they're gonna go forward to the planning board, or if they might wanna go back and provide some additions.
So I think we have a path.
Yeah, so if you can provide any additional comments to us by June 1st. And staff can work on incorporating those into their staff memo.
We want to come up with specific comments now as a commission.
I think we could have some more general, but I'm assuming as people look at the detailed plans, there might be.
It's gonna take a lot longer than 30 minutes to sort of look through all of the
Yeah.
plans.
Yeah.
And as a group,
That's why I was thinking,
Yeah.
Sort of
Okay,
looking at it individually and then sharing that feedback with Jamie.
Yep,
Because
thanks.
I don't know if, do we need a resolution related to that? I mean,
Not for staff to incorporate them
Okay.
into their comments.
So I think we're good then.
Yeah, if this was anything that, like as Bennett, as a planning board member, we wanted him to speak to, but I think the bulk are captured in the comments that we had from last week and then, or last meeting, I should say, and then, any kind of response to their response, can be incorporated into staff comments.
I mean, I think we can, two folks agree, their response does not change any of our recommendations
Right.
or questions. And so all of them stand. We're not like, okay.
You're like, oh, we're good then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they're just response. It's not like
It's typical consultant.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know that's.
But you guys are getting the drift fences, so there's that,
They're not mesh though, is that okay?
They're not
Like, I
mesh.
feel like Andrew brought up mesh.
right? I don't know, honestly, I don't know if that matters or not, so.
Yeah, I have no opinion on that.
All I know is they said
Like-
they aren't mesh, so I was like, oh, right. Oh,
Okay.
but yeah, I don't know.
So. All right,
So the new business is the tree preservation ordinance from South Portland.
yes. So, this is something. Let me just, there we go. That this group, I think, has talked about for off and on, for a while, as well as the sustainability committee has talked about it. We've gotten, our office has gotten some, emails and feedback concerns from residents about the amount of tree cutting that is happening in Scarborough. And then part of our open space, plan discussion last month, Kathleen kind of reiterated how important forested areas are to all of this. Thought it might be time to bring forward a tree preservation or tree protection ordinance. South Portland just passed theirs in 2023, so that's a good example for us to kind of start from. And just talk about, tonight I was hoping to just have a kind of high level discussion about, is this something that the commission wants to pursue? It's another way to help protect our natural resources and things like that. And if so, we can kind of start moving forward on draft language for a tree protection ordinance for Scarborough if it's
The comments and concerns generally been around development, not forest products.
Yes.
No, it's not forestry.
yes. Yeah. So let me just give a little bit more of an overview. We don't, other than shoreline zoning, there are basically no restrictions on cutting trees in Scarborough. And that's how it is in a lot of communities, which is why communities are adopting tree protection ordinances. So for shoreline zoning, you can't cut trees within a certain distance from the resource, or you need to have a permit to do that and identify the trees that are going to be cut. There are some requirements as part of our solar ordinance that requires basically a revegetation plan. So once the system is decommissioned, if there is tree cutting associated with installation of a commercial solar array, upon decommissioning, that area would have to be replanted, and as part of planning board approval, they need to submit their revegetation plan. So that is the other exception, that we do allow cutting of trees for solar arrays, but the area needs to be replanted. So it's not like when if the solar array is decommissioned, there's this wide open field that you can then develop. No, it needs to go back to a vegetated area. So South Portland's ordinance sets basically certain trees need to be preserved. So certain size trees, if they're heritage trees, they need to be preserved during development. And that may mean, you know, for anything that goes before planning board for site plan or subdivision, it may mean modifying proposed plans so that those trees are preserved on site. So the information that was provided to you, I did send you their ordinance language that was approved, and then their website actually gives a pretty good overview that we can look at as well. But But yeah, there's been obviously a lot of cutting happening lately because there's a lot of development happening in Scarborough.
And also post-storm, everybody. comes,
Yeah.
Yes.
Like everybody, my whole neighborhood and tree people all through there cutting trees, some not even close to houses. Some were close to houses, so one question I had in terms of this, I didn't see anything about distance from the house.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was worried about, especially we've had such strong storms, like I know that I've suffered some tree damage
Yeah.
and there's utilities also, so structures and utilities and, just a safety issue, roads, driveways,
So yeah, on the power line, you gotta cut it down. You can't wait for someone to tell you.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
cut it down. now.
yeah.
Right. It's a safety hazard, and you don't have power.
So I didn't see that there.
Mhm.
Again, about like, it has to be for a tree that's removed. The tree can be removed if it's X feet. I don't know what the thing is. What it should-
Yeah.
within 50 feet, I don't know. Structure.
That's a good point.
Little structure.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that, you do need to have that in there.
This is someone that had an 80-foot tree fall on their house in the
Yes.
April storm.
Yes,
Yeah, I
exactly.
agree that.
I'm like, the trees, they keep falling on everything.
Because I have as well. And
Yeah.
We had one just missed our house.
Yeah.
2000, we could have knocked out our power for 10 days.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want it falling on your neighbor's roof. also.
Exactly.
Like a good neighbor rule, it's not only your structures, it's your neighbor's
Right.
structures and.
Yeah.
Right, there are a lot of houses, there are a lot of trees that would probably be within the distance that allow for cutting. And so, but I think that's okay.
Well, it looks like South Portland, this according to their website, they're saying, you're doing site clearing. That's when you might need it, but like, it says most homeowners doing routine property management involving tree removal are covered under this threshold, meaning less than 10 trees. So it's designed to like mean most people don't have to do it most of the time.
Right.
Unless if you're cutting down all trees on your property, it's a little different than cleaning up a mess. So.
Right.
So as long as, we keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's intended to discourage and prevent clear cutting. And so if it is a woodlot and they have a forestry management plan and all of that, they would be exempt also from this because it is a working woodlot.
Would we need to come up with our own list of like heritage trees, or is it just an existing list?
The state identifies
Okay, so we wouldn't have,
heritage trees,
okay.
right? And, every year they do like the biggest tree competition, and so people will submit their big trees, and that's one way that they can document maybe new heritage trees, but yeah, that's not necessarily something that the town would have to come up with. We could just base it on the state information.
So it does require planning board review if you're removing dead or dying, those causing structural, yeah. I think because storms have just been so bad, I wouldn't want to propose. Like if it's possibly causing or could cause structural damage, like you don't have to go through a process.
Yeah.
No, I think that's what it's saying.
Yeah.
I think it says that if your project, like meaning your
Oh,
development that you
there we
built, if it normally does require planning board review, but you're removing trees that are, and trees that are not exempt, meaning trees that are not invasive species, not dead or dying,
Okay. I
not causing,
couldn't-
that's when you have to go to planning
Yeah.
board. Not normal. Yeah, it's written a little confusingly, like there's a few different like negatives built into that
You'll
sentence.
see the approval. Yeah, it's more.
Yeah, we could word our information a little
Anyway,
bit more
that's
clearly.
not our town.
Yeah, so,
The intent is there though.
so yeah, most homeowners doing routine property management involving tree removal are covered under the threshold, so you wouldn't need to get any kind of approval. So only if you're removing 10 or more significant trees do you need to get any kind of approval on a residential property.
Do we have any examples of a project this would have applied to?
Bailey's Seafood. We just talked about it on
Okay.
Monday. They cut down a lot of trees around their property. They claim they're all dead and dying. It was maybe up for debate. some neighbors were saying they weren't dead and dying, some neighbors were saying they were. Now they have, major light pollution going into, and noise pollution going into all the neighbors. They've been closed for 2 years, but we're trying to get it, we just kind of authorized a temporary reopening with requirements to build in the buffers back and all that. But they just chopped down a lot of trees. And then they replanted up, 100 tiny little ones that barely have grown yet. And so, it's not doing the same thing. So that's one example where this would have applied, where they would have had to go through the planning board to say, I'm gonna chop down these trees and this is why I want to chop down these trees.
And I think recently there was a church also that was doing some renovation, and did cut down a significant amount of trees. I don't know that the trees themselves would have met the significant tree, so, the certain size and things like that. But it's another, opportunity for,
How does this get enforced? Is this like Brian's office?
yeah, it would be enforced through code enforcement and for residential typically, and it would probably come through code enforcement. But if it is a violation of a site plan or subdivision plan, it would go through planning board.
They're basically, though, they're required to, if they take it down, they shouldn't have, we gotta plan.
Yeah, and they have to
Or they
replant at a higher rate than what they took.
Yeah, and I remember you brought up shoreline zoning, and that's a good thing to bring up, because shoreline zoning is not adequate in a lot of cases to protect trees. People just pay fines.
Right.
They'll cut down everything and then pay their fine. So there should be something that says you can't just pay a fine, cut down everything, because.
That or we should set an additional fine too that makes it, so there,
Sign jail time.
well, so there are.
I don't know what to do, but
$500 fines.
Yeah. it just needs to be significant enough to make it.
$1,000.
Cost per review.
Yeah. And that's typically through, well, shoreline zoning is done, it would be NERPA, Natural Resources Protection Act, that DEP would enforce, but, so yeah, these are kind of the penalties, when a project cannot be, this is, if they're designed to, so this is actually, never mind, this is in lieu, so if your project absolutely cannot maintain the trees on site that are supposed to be maintained, these are your options. You either replant 1.5 trees for every tree removed, you plant 2 trees off site, or you pay into a tree mitigation fund. And I assume that the city plants trees elsewhere using that funding, but I didn't look at the ordinance closely enough to know exactly what their tree mitigation fund is used for.
I agree with Pete, generally, that it needs to be, whatever the penalties are, they need to be significant enough that someone's not just going to say, whatever, I'll pay $500, chop down 1,000 trees.
Yeah,
It needs to be, I don't know,
$500 per tree shop.
yeah, that sounds good, that's.
500,000.
that's not adequate.
Yeah.
A lot of cases.
Okay, something that's going to actually be prohibitive
Yeah.
to the developer to not just do it.
Yeah, I will say, and then what is the payment into the tree mitigation fund and making sure that that is high enough to get them to comply on their site. Because I will say, lesson learned from our EV charging ordinance, we do have an in lieu fee as part of our EV charging ordinance, but the fee is set to be higher than what it would actually cost for them to just comply with the ordinance. So we're getting really good compliance with the ordinance because they don't want
So
to.
there's that model.
Yeah.
Well, we'd want, it'd be planting a mature tree, not a baby tree,
Right.
right?
You also gotta be careful of dollar amounts with inflation, right?
Right.
If that
Yeah.
board is gonna stand, you shouldn't just say $100 or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Say X percentage of.
Well, because it needs to be the cost of the tree and the cost of the labor to plant the tree as well.
Exactly.
We also have to remember that when they cut the trees, they also sell wood, so there's more incentive to cut the trees.
Well, in urban areas, there tends to be a high failure rate with tree planting because you do need to water them and maintain them. And so it's not just the plant, you can plant 100 trees and a small percentage of them could survive. So you need to make sure that that's included.
But all good things to.
What if we need like transfer of development rights for trees? I'm serious.
Well, that's-
Donor areas and sending areas.
Well, that's kind of replant 2 trees off-site,
But where?
right? We need a town
How do you-
forest.
And how do you, right, or it's a town forest or or preserve these trees in this area. I don't know. It's something to think about. I don't want to make it too complex, of course, but like, we have priority forested areas we want to conserve. If we can use this as a mechanism to go for 30 by 30 somehow,
Mhm.
for preserving forested land.
Yeah,
of
the
trees that are
mature trees,
meet
yeah.
these requirements, 10 inches DBH or 30 inches, whatever it was.
So would it be accurate to say there's agreement towards the concept, but we need to do some more thinking about what's working in South Portland, what's not working, and what we would need to change?
Yeah, and again, this ordinance in South Portland was just passed in like November of 2023, so they may not know yet what's not working.
Oh, I meant just as we're reading it, we're like.
This is meant to apply to already developed land, right?
It would apply to all land.
Because all land's already, if you're taking a forest into a parking lot, it's already going through planning board. And we already look at how many trees you're cutting down and what we could do to mitigate that and minimize that. So it surely could apply to that, but we have to just make sure it's not conflicting with current ordinances.
Yeah.
Like that, you know, site plan ordinances, all that stuff. But where it really could make a big difference is where someone already has a site developed with trees there, and then they just go, you know, maybe approved 50 years ago or something, and then they just decide to chop down the trees.
Mhm.
That's, I mean, I apply anywhere, but.
Well, and yeah,
maybe
because
it's important.
there's, and also right now, there's nothing stopping anyone from cutting trees on their property at all. So, you know, someone could have a parcel that is fully forested and just decide to cut it all down, and that's fine,
They still want clean leaves.
right?
So you say that sometimes, but.
So hopefully this would make that more difficult.
Okay. Interesting.
I think it's a good pursuit. And it should be pursued in conjunction with the environmental standards.
Yeah.
The way stronger than what we have.
Mhm. Yeah, it is a good companion to the environmental standards.
That would be a way to actually present it.
Mhm.
I don't know if it can catch up to where environmental standards are.
Yeah, well, it depends on how long it takes environmental standards to move forward,
Right. It
so,
might take a long time
Yeah.
for that.
so this may actually lap environmental standards, depending on how long that process takes. But yeah, so I think, for the next meeting, we can, I'll talk to Autumn about how, she sees this proceeding, but I think that we can probably, take South Portland's, ordinance and the feedback that you all provided tonight and start making some changes and have a draft for you guys to review, at the next meeting, if that sounds good.
June 26th.
June 26th.
So moving into updates, and I'm looking at Marla about promoting citizen stewardship.
Yes. Hi. So, we have been meeting regularly and we have, submitted a few articles to Allison Carrier. So we actually have like three articles. So we've submitted two in the past, since our last meeting last month. So one of them is about what is the Conservation Commission and the history of our Conservation Commission in our town. And also it relates to the state statute that allows us to have a Conservation Commission. So hopefully, you know, that will be published. I don't know when, because there's a lot of articles, I think, ahead of it. And then we have one about our current goals and objectives. So we're just trying to get some information out to the public about what is a Conservation Commission, what do we do, and what is the specific group working on. So, and we're still working on some events for later this year. And I will say we haven't really heard much about the land bond fund, the referendum question. We are interested in working with the folks who are working on that, but we haven't really heard anything about that. So that's about it for now. We're always looking for, I will say, we're looking for some speakers. If you would be interested in giving a presentation, so actually both Pete and Jamie helped us last year. Let us know. And if you have some ideas of somebody who you think would be a great speaker, please be in touch. All right, thank you.
So Karen, you're up next with town council, but I'm happy to jump in on the land bond specifically. I'll leave that up to you if you want to give your update or incorporate that in your
That
update.
was number 2 on my list, but I will start with it. Yeah, no, I mean, I thought my plan was to give a land bond update, because we got the survey results back, which were presented to the Parks and Conservation Land Board, which made a recommendation for a $6 million bond request. And so the plan now is for the Parks and Conservation Land Board to come before the Finance Committee in June. And they're going to talk about why they are recommending 6 million. And then I was just checking, and right now town council doesn't have a workshop for July, it looks like. So I'm hoping that we would be able to make this the July workshop, because I was talking to one of the counselors, and we do want a little time to also publicize this. And so, you know, when I talked to Jessica, you know, my idea about a workshop was more about like educating council, but also the public at that time about why, you know, they should support this. So that's kind of where we're at. I mean, we're pleased with the recommendation personally. We'll see how counselors take to it, but I think it seems pretty reasonable. I think there's general concern about just it being, which flows into my next update, was just it's a really tough year, like budget wise and with the reval and things like that. And so I think, you know, part of our discussion was concern that people might just not want to spend on anything. But that's why, you know, if we want to slow down growth, I think it's important to educate residents that this is actually a great way to do it. So the other update I just wanted to give was that, you know, we just had our whole budget season. I did not support the budget. I just was not very pleased. I didn't think there was enough in it. And I'm sorry if that hurts people's pocketbooks when I say that. But, you know, I was very happy that the climate action plan is in it. So that's great. We did not get 2 of the things that I had asked for that I think I had spoken to before previously was the stormwater management fee feasibility study was something that I would really like this town to do. I don't really know where to go from here unless I have to wait till next budget season, or if maybe we can do a little work at some point to maybe further educate and either decide if this is something that we really should do and get more support for it, or say, hey, this is a pipe dream, Karen, and this will never work in Scarborough. And then the other thing that came up with other counselors, I'm proud that it wasn't actually me, was a recommendation for more staffing for Jamie and engineering. I mean, I'm not alone that like we truly feel that they are understaffed. And then when we have all these plans like rolling out right now with like the feasibility study, the open space plan, we're doing a climate action plan, and this is a huge goal for me and for council. So next budget season, we're going to try again. But so that's the update with the budget. And I just wanted to speak to you guys. Just were talking about the tree protection ordinance. I mean, I think that's awesome. I think it's great. And I think you're right. I think if we can turn around something quickly, it's not as, maybe it's a little more palatable than some of the other bigger stuff that we're doing right now. I also think, I just want to thank everyone for their work, because I think it's important to have a continuous flow of this type of environmental conservation ordinances flowing around and us really addressing them, and council and everyone getting used to us just doing better and making these updates and getting used to these changes. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie?
Sustainability Committee, we just met this morning and I'm trying to remember what we talked about. So having 2 committee meetings in one day is tough. So the town council passed a commercial PACE ordinance, which is property assessed clean energy, which it basically unlocks funding for energy efficiency projects. So that was recently adopted by council. We've had a residential PACE ordinance on the books since 2010. And so this opens up additional financing opportunities for commercial landowners who might, or property owners who might want to do energy efficiency and renewable energy projects at their site, so that's awesome. Also looking at, providing recommendations for, electricity purchasing, looking at, purchasing, certified green or more certified green energy, at a cost savings to the town, so, that's a pretty exciting thing. Also, I would say that those are the two biggies at this point. And then Sustainable Scarborough Day, I've been delinquent in getting the committee together, kind of that staffing issue that Karen mentioned. But stuff is happening behind the scenes and hoping to get a planning committee meeting scheduled for early to mid-June so that we can start doing more planning for that, in addition to what I've kind of already been working on in my spare time.
And then just to add on to what Karen said, so PCLB is recommending $6 million be added to the November ballot for the following purposes, and this is based on the survey. Preserving drinking water sources, protecting marshes and wetlands that protect Scarborough from flooding and sea level rise, protecting water quality in rivers, streams, and Scarborough Marsh, conserving water quality, protecting natural areas next to Scarborough Marsh, preserving fish and wildlife habitat, preserving access to natural areas, conserving natural resources, protecting natural areas and protecting natural areas from development. So those were the purposes that polled the highest with citizens. And Nick McGee's Council Corner, I thought made the great point that I think we all need to consider when we are talking about it. Although it would be a $6 million land bond, it's almost like a line of credit. That doesn't get spent until there is a application that's approved by town council. So it's not spending we are just about to exhaust the 2019 bond. So it's a little different than some other capital bonds, because it doesn't get spent until there is a conservation project.
It's important to keep voters educated on that.
I think it's important that it's really thinking about it as a line of credit so that when an opportunity presents itself, a high quality conservation project present itself, the funds are available.
Voters have a pretty good history of supporting this.
Yes. I will say some of the feedback is, this is going to be used for other purposes. The land bond is very specific in what it can be used for and what it has been used for in the past, and it'd be continuing the success and the history in Scarborough of, conservation through the land bond.
Any other items?
So I think we'll definitely be using I always call it the wrong thing, promoting citizen stewardship group to help get the word out. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I think any different avenues and getting consistent messages out in lots of different ways is going to be really important. So yeah, it's great that Marla and Kathleen are willing to support that. Thanks, Marla.
Thank you.
Absolutely, yes, we'll be working on that. And eventually I think it might be nice to either have members of the Conservation Commission write something like a letter to the editor, or perhaps we as a group write a letter. I'm not sure which way we should go, but I think we need to have a voice in that.
Good point. You can always just work a letter together via email and then approve it at a meeting, send it off to the Scarborough Leader, and they'll publish it. They're often dying for things to publish. Sometimes they get very sparse leaders in the mailbox.
It's true.
Mhm.
So we started at Google Doc.
Yeah.
Easy.
And as Karen mentioned, the next step is the Finance Committee on June 13th, and then a council workshop in July, where I think July is basically the deadline to get on the November ballot. So it's going to happen quick.
Yeah.
And then we'll be in campaign, which we as a commission cannot campaign for a land bond, but we as members can't.
Yeah, and I think this commission can talk
But we can
about the
do
importance,
education.
yes, we can educate on the importance of
We can't
land
endorse it.
conservation. And I think,
as
I
a
need
commission.
I need to refresh myself on that, because I know we had talked about that.
We need to, yeah, we need clarity on,
Yeah, honestly, I think that I think that we can, but let me check with, our town clerk, who is kind of the,
Don't wanna break the rules.
yeah, right?
if allowed, I think it would be great if the commission endorsed
Yeah,
the measure.
I expect that to be a no-brainer.
It
They'd be
would
very
be.
easy vote if we were to do so. I think it would be a unanimous. Be shocked if it wasn't.
It supports the open space plan, it supports 30 by
Yeah.
30, which are all initiatives that came out of this group, so, yeah.
And I don't know if there is a next step with finance committee happening on the 13th and town council workshop, if there's a letter of support from this commission.
Well,
To
and
the
this commission did write a memo in support of the land bond in concept. I mean, we didn't have a specific number to put in there, but definitely wrote a letter to the town, or a memo to the town council in support, and that was sent, I want to say, in February,
That sounds about right.
so.
Yeah, so are there any other items? I am at the end of the agenda.
I am too.
Good timing.
Next item I see is adjourn.
Adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right.
Okay.
You all.